Okay, we're back. We're going to talk about simple interest. So this is introducing section 3.1. So in this lecture, we will start with introduction. What is simple interest? Why are we interested in it? That sort of thing. And then we'll look at some problems. And those come in really three sections. There's the problems from 17 through 24 in section 3.1. And we'll talk about some problems like that first, and then the problems from 25 to 32, and we'll look at those, and then some word problems, and we'll do examples of each one of those. And so I'm going to try and be a little specific about where I am and what I'm doing. So what is simple interest? It's you borrow money, you have to pay it back, you pay an interest rate, but you just pay interest on the principal. You never pay interest on the interest itself. So you just pay interest on the principal, depending on how long you hold it. Depending on how long you hold it. And so there are two formulas here in the simple interest section, which is 3.1. The first is for the interest. So if you borrow money, how much interest do you pay? I equals PRT. What are all these letters? I is the interest paid or owed. P is the principal. That's the amount of money that you borrow or is lent. Right? I mean, the bank lends it, you borrow it. R is the interest rate. And in all of chapter 3, interest rates have to be in decimals. A little exclamation point there, okay? R is always a decimal. And T is time. How long you borrow the money for. Time always has to be measured in years, although it won't be given to you in years, so you always have to convert it to years. So that's the formula for interest. The second formula, we'll call that formula 1. The second formula is for the amount. So in any account, in any kind of financial situation, the amount of money in an account or the amount of money that's owed on a loan, anything like that, is the principal. That's how much you actually borrow or is lent or you have in the account, plus the interest. Right. So principal plus interest, that's the amount that you have. So that leads us to the second formula, because we know interest is P times R plus T. And here's formula 2. The amount in an account is the principal times 1 plus RT. So those are the two formulas. Right? Okay, so not a whole lot there, right? Principal times rate times time, that gives you how much interest is owed. Interest plus principal, that's the total amount that has to be paid back. Okay, so we'll start then by talking about problems from 17 through 24 in the book. These are all sort of the same problem. There's a formula, I equals PRT. And what do they do in these problems? Well, they give you 3 of the 4 variables and they ask you to solve it. So one very typical problem along these lines is number 21 as an example. I equals PRT. If I is 48 and P is 100 and T is 240 days, what is what is R? So they give you the formula that you need to deal with, I equals PRT, and then I always write the 4 variables in a little column, and we say, well, okay, what are the numbers they give us? Well, they told us in problem 21 that I is 48, that P is 600, I think it's 600, and T is 240 days. And we don't know what R is. And so all problems in section 3.1 and 3.2 actually run pretty much in this manner. They give you a formula, or there is a formula that you have to know, and they give you every variable except one, and you have to find the one that you don't know. So you just plug everything in, and what does that give you? Well, 48, that's my interest, is P, which is 600, times my rate, which I don't know, times 240 over 360. Why 240 over 360? Because this is days. Oops. And what we need to do to days, convert time to years. Boink. Now, for financial reasons, this used to be, before there were computers everywhere, instead of dealing with 365 days, they have a year being 360 days, because it's much easier to divide by 360. So we'll go with what the book suggests, which is a 360-year day, and we'll just consider those last 5 days to be a holiday or something. So 240 days is how much of a year? Well, 240 divided by 360, and that is 2/3. So 240 over 360 up here, that's my 2/3 of the year. That's where that came from. So 48 equals 600 times R times 2/3. And you just need to solve that for R. So we multiply both sides by 3 and divide by 600 times 2. And that's my R. And if you actually divide that all out, you get 0.12 equals R. And so what's my interest rate? 12%. Right? In calculations, R is always a decimal, but when you get the final answer, you want to know what's the interest rate, and we convert it to a percentage, and so it's 12%. And so this is very typical of problems 17 through 24. They give you this formula, and you're just sort of asked, well, if we give you 3 of the 4 things, can you calculate the 4th? So that's no problem. So at this point, it might be good for you to take a moment to look at a couple of those problems that have been assigned in section 3.1, 17 through 24, and see if you can solve some of those. And then you can start up the video again, and we'll move on to the next thing. There we go. And draw a little line across. Problems 25 through 32. So 3.1, 25 through 32. Same kind of deal with the previous one. We're dealing with this formula now. Right? And again, there's 4 variables, P, A, R, and T, and they want to know, well, if we give you 3 of the 4, what's the 4th one? So problem 27, if I'll do that as an example, they say, well, suppose that A is 910, that R is 16%, and that R is 16%, and that T is 13 weeks. What is P? Right? So they give you 3 things. Now remember, R has to be converted to a decimal, so 16%, and that becomes 0.16. And T has to be converted to years, so 13 weeks. There's 52 weeks in a year, so 13 out of 52 is 1/4. If you know anything about playing cards, right, there's 4 suits, each with 13 cards, 52 cards in a deck. So 1 suit is 1/4 of a deck. So 13 out of 52 is 1/4 of a year. Great. So now we have everything set up so that we can plug everything in. So P equals 910 times 1 plus, and don't forget the parentheses, R, which is 0.16 times 1/4. And you multiply that out. You multiply all that out and figure out what you get. Oh, and I got A and P reversed there, didn't I? Oh, that's sad. So this is A, this is P. I apologize for that. A we don't know. P is what we're looking. We know P. We're looking for A. Unfortunately, I don't know entirely how to edit stuff here, so I'm not going to go back and redo it. So A equals P times 1 plus RT. In problem 27, they give us P, R, and T. So a quarter of a year, 0.16, 910, and then they calculate what's A, and that's 910 times 1 plus 0.16 times 1/4, which is $946.40. So what's going on in this problem? Someone borrowed $910 at 16% interest for 13 weeks. How much did they have to pay back? Well, the principal plus the interest comes to $946.40. Okay, and so now we'll move on to some word problems. At this point, you should be able to do all the problems up to problem 32 in the book, because all those problems or 37 actually, I think. All those problems are either conversions of interest rates into decimals or weeks into years, stuff like that, or just plugging into these equations. The word problems are a little more sophisticated, but not a whole lot. So we'll look at problem 42. This is a lot like 41 and 43 and 44 and 45 and 47 and 49. Those are, well, up to 47. So problem 42, $5,000 is loaned at 6.2% for 9 months. How much interest is charged? So, well, in any word problem, you always look at the last sentence to tell you what it is you're looking for, and here we're looking for the interest. Right? And that tells us this is the formula that we want to use because we're interested in calculating the interest. So I equals PRT. What's I? What's R? What's T? Well, we don't know what I is, so we leave that there. The principal is 5,000. The rate is 6.2%, which is 0.062, and the time is 9 months, and we know we have to convert that to years. So T is 9 months out of 12, which is 3/4. And so how much interest is charged? I equals 5,000 times R, which is 0.062, times T, which is 3/4. And if you multiply that all out, you get $232.50. Right. So 5,000 is loaned at 6.2% for 9 months. You're going to owe $232.50 in interest by using this formula and plugging stuff in. So that's 42 and 46. So problem 46 then is a similar problem. Suppose $10,325 is paid back on a loan after 6 months. So if the interest rate on this loan is 6.5%, what then is the amount that was borrowed? Right, so what we're looking for is how much was it actually borrowed. They tell us what was paid back. They tell us the time and the rate. So, since we're not looking just for the interest but the total amount, right, we'll use this formula. A equals P times 1 plus RT. A is the amount that has to be, total amount that has to be paid back. P is the amount that you would borrow. R is the rate that you got. T is the time it took. So 10,325 is how much is paid back. How much was borrowed? That's P. We don't know that, so we'll put a little question mark. Interest rate is 6.5%, but of course the rate always needs to be turned into a decimal. The time is 6 months. So T is 6/12, which equals 1/2 of a year. Right? Because you always need to turn time into a year. And so again, we know everything except for one variable, and we plug it in. So we get 10,325 equals P, which we don't know, times 1 plus 0.065, that's our interest rate, times 1/2. And if you multiply all this out and divide by 2, well, you get 10. If you multiply all this out here on the right, you get 10,325, which equals P. Half of 0.065 is 0.0325 plus 1. And then you divide both sides by this, by 1.0325, and you end up with 10,000 equals P. So what do we have here? 6.5% for 6 months. This is the amount that was paid back. So how much did you actually borrow? Well, $10,000. And that's 46. And so that would get us all the way through, if we're looking at the homework problems, that should get, you should be able to do the problems 41, 43, 44, 45, and 47 and 49 at this point by looking at these problems. Okay, so last example, and this is similar to 53, 54, and 55, 56. And something called T-bill. And so this is like problems 53 through 56. After this example, you should be able to go and look at those and figure out what's going on. So what is a T-bill? This is actually called a treasury bill. And how they work is, it's a promise by the government to pay you back a certain amount of money after a certain amount of time. So, for example, a 13-week $1,000 T-bill means in 13 weeks, if you buy this thing, in 13 weeks, the government pays you $1,000. So how much would you pay for that? And that's always an interesting question. If you're looking at finance and going into the stock market and stuff, this has a lot to do with sort of basic interest rates. So you've got 13 weeks. Think about what else you could do with your money. If you can get a really high interest rate, then you can move all your money into this high interest rate stock account or something and not buy T-bills because maybe T-bills won't give you a very good rate. So if the interest rates are really high, demand for T-bills will be relatively low, and so T-bills won't sell for very much. On the other hand, if interest rates are low, then the T-bill will be a, if there isn't a really good competition for that, people would want to buy more T-bills, and so the price for T-bills will be high. And so in general, how much do you pay for a T-bill? Well, less than $1,000, right? The higher the interest rates, the less you pay, right? Because if there's, a place where you can invest your money where you can get a good return, and T-bills might not give you that, then you move your money away from T-bills. And if the demand for T-bills goes down, then the price goes down. Okay, so less than. So that's what T-bills are, right? You buy it now, and in 13 weeks, the government will pay you $1,000. And basically what you're doing is you're betting that you'll make more in that time than with the T-bill than you would with anything else. So what kind of problems are we dealing with involving T-bills? Well, a very typical T-bill example, here it is suppose a 13-week $5,000 T-bill sells for $4,985.44. Right? So, what is going on here? In 13 weeks, the government pays you $5,000. How much are you willing to pay for that now? Well, $49.85.44. You sell that, and that means that you've locked in about $15 worth of interest over these 13 weeks. Now, what kind of interest rate is that? If you're looking for other places to invest your $4,985, can you get a better interest rate on something else that would get you more than $5,000? So we want to know what's the rate here. So A equals P times 1 plus RT. Because what's going on? Well, you're paying, or you're loaning the government this much money, 4,985.44, and they say, well, we'll pay you back with interest in 13 weeks, and we'll pay you back a flat $5,000. And how long does it take? 13 weeks, which is 1/4 of a year. And so what's the interest rate that you're getting? You know, and if you can get a better interest rate somewhere else, you don't buy the T-bill. You go someplace else. So you plug everything in. 5,000 equals 4985.44 times 1 plus R, which we don't know, times 1/4, because it's a quarter of a year. And now you solve for R, because that's what we're looking for. We're solving for the interest rate. Oh, I suppose we should put that in the problem here. What is the interest rate? Okay, so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for R. So divide both sides by 4,985.44 to get rid of this coefficient, and that will give us 1.002921 equals 1 plus 1/4 of R. Subtract a 1 from both sides, and then multiply by 4. And so what is our interest rate? Well, move the decimal place over 2, and you get 1.1682%. So this T-bill up here, right, loaning the government 4,985.44 and getting back 5,000 in 13 weeks, that's essentially an interest rate of 1.1682%. You know, and if you can do better than that, you invest your money somewhere else and you don't buy the T-bill. If you can't do better than that, then you buy the T-bill, and it's pretty safe. So T-bills are also sort of a way to judge what the interest rates are, right? If T-bills are relatively expensive, then interest rates are really low. If T-bills are relatively cheap, then interest rates are pretty high. So you should be able to do the T-bill problems, right? They're all pretty much of this form, right, where the selling price is P, the amount you get back is A, and they generally tell you the time. And so the T-bills, problems 53 through 56 are like that. So after going through this, hopefully you'll be able to do most of the problems in the book. You know, I'm going to try and structure these videos to be more like this, sort of more key to the problems in the book. And so when you do the videos, hopefully you can watch with the book in hand, and that will